Hello, this is Dr Helen and Welcome to our GenderGP podcast, where we will be discussing some of the issues affecting the trans and non-binary community in the world today, together with my co-host, Marianne Oakes, a trans woman herself, and our head of therapies. I'm really delighted to welcome you, Amanda. Amanda Knox is joining us from Ottawa in Canada, and she is a writer, a speaker, and a human rights advocate. You can see that I've read that off the piece of paper. But actually, what I would really like you to do, Amanda, is introduce yourself. We are a group of transgender advocates in the UK. We've been working with trans people for a long time. And what we would love to do is capture some of your experiences and the advocacy work that you have done over where you are, to see if we can learn, share ideas, join hands, get enthusiastic about new avenues ahead. So please introduce yourself, tell us all about you and the work that you do and the experiences that you've had.
Wonderful. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. That's great. So my name is Amanda. My pronouns are she and her, and I do live in very cold Ottawa. Our family is a fairly special one. We are a family of 6, and one of our children came out as trans in 2014. She told us in an email, and a year and a half later, my spouse of then 18 years came out as well and let me know that she was also a woman. And the work I do as a result of all these changes in our family is to help people understand that in a lot of ways, we're just like everybody else. That is my work in a nutshell. It's how can we be inclusive of the differences while also recognizing that the differences aren't that big of a deal in the end, that we're still the same family on the same street with the same friends, more or less, and the same life. So that's, I now speak all over the country, sometimes with my family members, sometimes on my own, and I write about our experiences just to sort of bridge the gap and bring people in.
Brilliant.
Wow. The thing that just stuck in my mind when you were talking then is how ordinary you kind of perceive your life. It's special but ordinary at the same time, that nothing's changed in the street. Except maybe there are 2 extra females. And I spend all my time talking to people and saying, whatever they've read in the newspaper, when they meet me, I just think they struggle to equate the 2 things, what they've read and what they're talking to. And I'm not bigging myself up there. It's just the fact that it disarms them. And I'm just thinking that's probably what you're doing as a family.
That's what we're trying to do. I mean, I think that for people who don't know that they know any trans people, because I think we've all probably met at least 1 or 2 trans people in our lives, possibly more, it can seem so different. And I had so many misconceptions when my daughter came out. And as much as I've learned, I also had to unlearn a lot of those misconceptions that have been taught to me in the media, through movies and television shows, and early media portrayals of trans people, and sadly sometimes still current portrayals of trans people and their lives. So I think by having that family piece around it, by saying, yeah, we're just a couple of parents, we have some children, we have a mortgage, we have jobs, and we have a glass of wine and watch Netflix like everyone else, that really brings it home for people in a relatable and non-threatening way.
Yeah. I'm interested that your daughter, and I'm sure lots of people, I won't be the first, that your daughter came out to you by email. And the reason that I'm interested is because I have no idea how long your daughter spent crafting that email, but the way that our system works is that people who want to access any advice or support or medical care access that by email. And what I've seen from people is that sometimes people will just go, it's almost scary just to get the fingers on the keyboard and go, write it down really quickly and send, and it's done, And I can also see that some other people spend literally days crafting that email and putting those words on paper for the first time. So I'm interested that your daughter did it that way as well. I don't know whether you have anything to share on that.
So the story around that is kind of sweet, actually. We have something in Canada called Pink Shirt Day, and it's a day in schools where you will wear pink to show your support for people dealing with bullying, homophobia, transphobia, etc. And so I was super organized, and I took my two youngest children out for shirts the night before, because that's what put together parents do.
Yes, I know.
Right. And we were having a hard time finding anything. This is not surprising, but also because we were shopping in the boys department, it was especially hard in 2014 to find shirts. So our littlest, our youngest, Jackson, he was 7 at the time, and he was getting really worked up about it. He was like, I don't understand. Pink is just a color. Well, I like pink. Why can't we find anything? I just want to wear it. And I said, yeah, buddy, you're right. This should not be an issue. You should be able to wear what you want, express yourself the way you want, etc. We had a really good talk about expression. And I felt when we went home after eventually finding a couple of shirts that I was a really good mom to him. And I didn't realize that our 11-year-old was really taking this in. And when she got to her room, finally figured out that, this was the time. If she was going to do it, it was going to be now. So that conversation meant for another child ended up being the catalyst. She wrote that email. It took her a while. She said it took a couple of hours at least. And she really struggled over the wording, but the wording was beautiful. And we ended up using that wording. Well, we ended up using that email to access care here in Canada as well. We sent that email to the gender diversity clinic at our local children's hospital. But the nice thing about emails is that it gives somebody the freedom to express themselves. It also gives the recipient time to react. Yeah. So all of my shock, anything that may have been on my face, any concern, any apprehension was something she didn't have to deal with, which made it so much better. And it's the way that a lot of people come out, I think, for that reason. By the time we went into her room, which was very shortly after receiving the email, all we had were words of love and support. It was very, very easy to get in there, and she was in her bed crying, and we got in one on each side of her, and we rubbed her back, and we told her we love her and that we were going to figure this out together. I'm so glad that she gave us the space to internalize it.
Mm-hmm. That's lovely. That's really lovely. Lovely for her and lovely for you too as well.
How mature. That's the, for a young person to do that and to be able to write something that said everything it had to say.
Yeah, she's a very insightful kid. She's 17 now, but even at 11, she put right in her email, please take some time with this. Like, please, essentially she said, please don't come into my room till you've given this some thought. You've had time to think about it. And I was like, how genius to be able to do that. But that was a really good point. It gave us a second to sort of breathe and take it in before we went in. Very smart.
Did she lay down any ground rules? Like, I need you to believe me. I need you to understand this. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, in the email, she said, please don't be mad. Mm-hmm. Please try to understand. And again, this is 11-year-old language in 2014, but she said, I am a girl trapped in a boy's body. And more than anything else, I need to be a girl. Yeah. This is who I am. This is who I've always been, right? So she really talked about it that way. Later on, I remember I really struggled with the idea initially. I believed her. But I think there was a part of me that wanted to be absolutely sure. And that's not her fault. I'm an anxious person. I like to disaster-proof everything. So the next day I was on the phone with everyone, but over, getting her appointments, getting everything set up and learning to advocate with her and for her. But there was a time when I sort of tested the waters, and I didn't come right out and say, so, hey, is this a phase? Mm-hmm. But I sort of pushed back a little bit. And again, she's a very bright kid. She's very insightful. And she flat out turned around to me and said, Mom, it's not a phase. It's not a fad. This isn't something that I'm trying on. This is who I am. And I understand that it's new to you, but it isn't new to me. So she made it very clear early on that this was going to be her path and that we had to catch up and respect her. And I thought that was a wonderful thing to put forth.
Yeah. I think I don't know about you, Marianne, but when I've worked with children in the past, I've been shocked, surprised, and enthused about how educated they are, how smart they are, how eloquent they are, and sometimes I wonder whether those are the ones that manage to access what it is that they need, because they're not pushed back by questioning adults or rules that are too difficult to navigate. Do you know what I mean? Because certainly, I mean, I've never looked at the research, but I would say of our younger cohort, they're all high achievers in school and in education. A lot of them are high achievers in school and education, and it makes me wonder about those. I mean, and I don't believe that there's a link between education or intelligence or ability and being transgender, but is it that they are more able to access what it was that your daughter needed, unwavering belief and support? I don't know, Marianne, is that something that you've ever come across? Or
well, the question that was going through my mind is, what was the family dynamic before this event? So did your daughter grow up in a very liberal, easy environment? Because a lot of the children that I work with, even when the parents are being supportive, they'll talk about how they heard them say homophobic statements or racist or show some elements of bigotry. I don't know, but that even if it was only tiny and kind of unnoticed by the parents, that it kept them from speaking sooner. So I'm just wondering what kind of environment not that you would have said anything quite so bad, but
yeah, we were pretty open. We've always sort of tried to be as open-minded as possible and to learn. I very early on had a good friend who's a woman of color in the US, and she sat with me and, online, mind you, but she really took the time to explain privilege to me. And so learning that, 20 years ago, and what privilege is and the different types and how it's multi-layered and complicated, that's something that we always talked about with our children, the benefits of privilege and the drawbacks for other people and how we need to lift everyone up. So that was a big conversation in our house. No, homophobia definitely was not something we have always said. We would love our children no matter who they are, who they love. I think it did give her an environment to express herself. Her biggest fear, though, was that when she was looking for examples out there of kids who were affirmed, a lot of kids were saying, I thought my parents were going to be accepting. My parents are very liberal people. They're very open-minded people. So I thought, and then I tell them that I'm trans and now I'm, kicked out of the house, or they won't let me access medical care or whatever it might be. And so she thought that might happen to her, that her parents, who she perceived to be really open-minded, wouldn't be open-minded when it came to this. Right.
But that idea of what we're looking for is security, I think, as children, and we do pick up on every nuance. And I think I can remember, seeing stories in the newspaper and watching my dad read them. And even if he didn't say anything, his body language taught me everything. So I'd like to think we're all living in more open-minded times, but I still think some children are picking up on that, and that can make things difficult. I'm going to, you have to forgive me here as well, because in the back of my mind, my family's been through a similar transformation to yours, except both my children are still cis, for want of a better description. But Vicky, the dynamic between me and Vicky is quite big, and people are always obsessed about our sexuality. And I'm just wondering how you've coped with that, because your identity is going to have changed, or the perception of your identity will have changed.
I think it goes back to privilege and how for a long time we were, to the world, we looked like a cis-het couple. So, cisgender, heterosexual couple, and we could blend in anywhere. And one of the things I said about moving out to the suburbs, and this particular suburb where I used to live before when we were much younger, and really felt out of place because we were, starving students and just didn't really fit in with everyone else around here. When Zoe wanted to move back here, I thought, well, okay, I mean, at least, if we live here, we'll just fit in with everybody. Because, at the time, if you had asked me to describe my family, I would have told you that we were a mom and a dad and 3 boys, right? That was, and I mean, you can find that all over the place. So when people started to come out in the family, well, at first, we found out we had a daughter. Well, lots of people have daughters, but then when Zoe came out, now suddenly we were two women, right? I mean, to the world, we were a household with two women, two moms. And I was really worried about that. But in our day-to-day life, it's not a factor. It's only online. Online, people have so many questions. My own sexuality it's an interesting part of the story because I have known for a really long time, and I came to realize over the last few years, even before Zoe came out, that I'm a lesbian. And I grew up in an environment, my parents are lovely people, but, I went to a Catholic school, and it was, a more or less sort of loosely Catholic upbringing and a lot of expectations. And the expectation was that I was going to grow up and marry a man, and because I was bullied so badly when I was younger, I hid that part. I just wanted to fit in with everybody. And so I married someone I thought was a man who, oddly enough, was the only man, and I'm using quotes here because she's not one, that I was ever even somewhat attracted to. So I thought, well, this works. When she came out and really blossomed as herself, and she's a beautiful, beautiful person inside and out, a world away from the miserable person that she was before. She's so much happier and more engaged, and she's gorgeous. That really helped me come to terms with my own sexuality. So that was you could say that an email from an 11-year-old helped two other people in the family find themselves and live more authentic lives, which is really fantastic. But yeah, the world around us is, at least in Canada and in our particular area, is relatively accepting of who we are. But you still get a lot of people who are really hung up on the fact that, she's a trans woman. So if she's a trans woman, I can't possibly be gay, right? And it's like, first of all, that's completely inaccurate. She's definitely a woman. But secondly, who you're with, outside of that completely does not dictate your sexuality. That is very much who, that belongs to us. So it's funny. I've learned a lot about myself through this.
That's amazing, and that's such a beautiful story. And I have to say, you tell your story so beautifully. It's absolutely, I mean, I know everyone listening will be so warmed by that love, and I hope people get to see the expression on your face like I can see it now, because all I can see is happiness and love, and that's honestly so beautiful. What a lovely story. And your boys, we must not forget your beautiful sons. How have they navigated the journey that they've been on?
I'm really proud of our sons. They're currently 13 and almost 23, and they are the most resilient and kind, compassionate souls. So taking to having a sister took no time at all. The first time that we sat them down and told them, it was me and Alexis. We sat down together and we told them, and Eric, our eldest, just said, okay, that's great. I've got you. I love you and you're my sister. Perfect. And then Jackson, who again was 7 at the time, he pauses for a minute and he gives his face. He's like, okay, so let me get this straight. Everyone thinks you're a boy, but actually you're a girl. And Alexis said, yeah, that's about right. And he said, okay, that's cool. I always wanted a sister anyway. So that was it. It was very simple. And then he internalized it, I think, faster than anyone else and went on about his life. It was a little harder when Zoe came out. I think that in our society, a big part of our identity is who our parents are for a lot of us. And so the boys, as accepting and loving as they were since the moment they found out, I think they struggle a little bit with what that meant for them, right? If I don't have a dad, because she definitely does not see herself as their dad, and they absolutely, if you ask them today, would tell you they don't see her as their dad. But they thought, if I don't have a dad, well, what does that mean for me as a man? right? How does that work? And they didn't have the opportunity of knowing, say, if you're a boy who was raised by two women and you knew this from the start, well, then, you've always grown up with that knowledge. But they had to sort of rework it in their minds. But they were very quickly, I think, it just became no big deal. And they learned that you can be who, you can learn all the things about being a great man from anybody. It doesn't have to be a father. It doesn't have to be a father figure. And so they learned a lot of those things from Zoe, even though Zoe is a woman. So I think that was a real healing point for them. But they've never been anything but kind and supportive. I've never seen them do or say anything that hasn't been completely affirming of either one of the trans people in our family. It's incredible. And they're more than anybody, I think they're an example of how to do that right.
The interesting thing there, and I think this is something that I've gone through, I've had to, for my own peace of mind, re-establish the role that I play with my children. I say children, they're in their 30s now, but I still have a role to play with them. And there was a lot of incongruence with that when I was still exploring my gender in a meaningful way. But as I've come through that, as I've gone on the journey, as I've started to transition, that role's become clearer again, and actually very little's changed. It was me adjusting to who I was, and the roles I played doesn't invalidate my gender identity. So I think that's just part of the process of parenthood, because we change as parents as we grow older anyway, don't we?
Absolutely. We all take on different roles. I mean, It was funny. I found, it was asked of me a little while ago, did you find your roles changed as a couple when you realized you had a wife and not a husband? And it was actually Zoe who brought it up to me at one point. She said, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, this is actually a really good thing, but you expect a lot more of me now. And I have always thought, I'm a feminist. I believe in, an equal split of labor in a relationship, et cetera, et cetera. But it is true. It was like, I would just assume that of course she's going to do half of everything because we're in an equal partnership. Whereas before I think we sort of stereotypically took on roles too. And it was never really discussed. It just kind of happened. So I have learned so much about myself and about just the way society works and all of the things that I never thought about before. It's been a really neat journey.
Yeah. So you talked about the way society works. So I'm imagining, well, I don't know. I've never met anyone who's had some hills and vales that, like you're describing, has to have a completely unimpinged journey. So I don't want to lead you in any way, but I'm imagining things like school, things like employment, things like the environment around you, and things like healthcare. Were there any particular challenges that you faced that you had to come out from and succeed or partially succeed? And is there any way that you could share how you succeeded, and so that people listening can feel empowered to take on this journey and get to the other side?
As a parent, it was, I don't want to say we did a lot of pioneering, because I don't think that's fair. A lot of the work had been done for trans kids before we got there, but a lot of work was still happening. And so we had an issue with the school, for example. So Alexis was 11. She was in her final year of elementary school, grade 6, and she was going to go off to middle school for grade 7 and 8 the following year. This was February. So a couple weeks after she came out, I went into the school and tried to talk to one of the administrative staff, and was met with a lot of resistance. There was a lot of thinking out loud. What will the other parents think? Well, she can't possibly use the bathroom that the girls use because, and a lot of misgendering and a lot of using her old name, even though I was telling her what name to use. And I remember leaving feeling so defeated. So this is where having support comes in. In my case, I called my mom sobbing from the car and in the parking lot because I was crying so hard after that terrible meeting that I couldn't drive. And my youngest brother has Down syndrome, and my mom taught me to advocate just through example for him. She's always been a good advocate for him. And so she really helped me calm down and get refocused and remind me that Alexis had rights, and I just had to look for those rights and present them in a factual way. I think facts are the biggest thing when you're trying to get stuff done and when you're trying to advocate alongside a trans child or as a trans person. Probably just having that, here are the basic human rights that I am allowed, and I'm allowed to access healthcare. I'm allowed to have these services in school. I'm allowed to, and so I used that, but I said my child. Healthcare was, we were able to access a gender diversity clinic, and not everybody else has that opportunity, which is too bad, because it was life-saving for her. And we're wrapping that up this year, and she's going on into adult healthcare. So that will be a whole new navigation. But thankfully, my wife Zoe has done a lot of that. So we sort of know where to go and what to do. The most frustrating thing, I think, was to get doctors to listen, to get people to listen, and to really understand that she wasn't going to change her mind. This is who she is. This is who she will always be, very likely. This is just who, this is who she's been all along. And so, there was a lot of trepidation around moving things too quickly and that sort of thing. So we're talking a lot with practitioners in Canada about that right now. The other thing is dealing with healthcare outside gender specific stuff can be really tough, because if we go to access, say, mental health services or something like that, it sort of immediately becomes, oh, you're trans? Oh, so are all your problems centered around you being trans? And it's like, no, I'm stressed out about school, right? Like, I'm stressed out about school, or I'm having friendship problems or something like that. So I just think, like, learning your facts and knowing exactly what to say to people, having a plan. Again, I'm a disaster proofer. That helps so much when dealing with people who may not have as much experience.
Yeah. So I think that's really good advice. And it's that having those facts is really important, isn't it? Sometimes they're not there because that rule book hasn't been made yet, and that obviously causes difficulties. But we do have the experience, don't we? We have the basic facts in place now, and we have the experience. And one of the difficulties we have in the UK is younger people accessing blockers on time to prevent puberty, and then accessing gender-affirming hormones in time to have puberty with their friends. Because, as you say, everyone is saying, don't go too quickly. And the young person is saying, I want to go quickly. I want to be the same as all the people in my class. That they're all doing puberty, why can't I do puberty? And although those rule books the doctors who are in charge of that haven't been brave enough to say, yes, this is the right thing to do. So those rule books are not in place yet. But what we do have, don't we, is the experience of so many people who've gone on this journey before. And I guess that's what some of the work that you do, isn't it, is showing, being so open with your family and saying, look at my family, look at our experience. And I noticed when you were talking then, you said this is likely who she's going to be for the rest of their life. There's always that tiny caveat, isn't there, in there, just in case there's a small chance that this journey changes in some way. But yes, I couldn't agree with you more. Having those facts, even if those rule books haven't been expressly written down yet, and making that plan. And I was kind of thinking when you were talking about the administrative that you went to see, I wonder if we'd sent that email, the warning email before you went in, if you know what I mean. I don't know whether you did or not, but because that helped you so much, didn't it, with your daughter? So it's maybe that's another piece of advice for people is, send that warning. I am going to be coming in to see you. I am going to be discussing this, and this is the kind of outcome that I'm hoping that we will be able to negotiate together. I don't know, Marianne, whether you have any thoughts on that.
I don't think we can put a value on having a good advocate, because if I'm honest with you, as a trans person, and I think I'm reasonably strong, but, I'm quite easily browbeaten by people when they come back at you. We've had a situation today where I'm being told I can't change my name at the gender clinic, of all places. And quite quickly I'm beaten down. And then I speak to Helen and she said, have you thought about this? And I just, no, I haven't. So having good advocacy, it just feels so so great. We could do with more people going into the schools, because if you leave it to the trans person, we're going in a position of vulnerability at the very least. And I know that many trans people will accept less just to get out of the room safe, if that makes sense.
Well, I don't like the idea that every person from a marginalized group automatically has to educate everybody. I mean, how exhausting is that, right? To always have to be the person to say, okay, well, let me teach you a few things about who I am, right? It'd be really nice, if a lot of that groundwork was already done, so that you can live. And I think, it's funny, going back to the, this is likely who she's always going to be. I always leave open the direction to be navigated by my daughter, because I think that at the end of the day, I am a cisgender person. I don't know what it's like to be trans. I can give it my best guess and I can give it my best shot, but she knows herself better than anyone else. So she knows herself to know that this is the course that she needs to take. I don't have to fully understand it to be supportive of her. I'm very comfortable in the gender that I was assigned at birth, and I don't foresee that ever changing. So to me, the best thing that I can do is just listen to her, listen to my wife, listen to people who actually live it. If we all spent more time listening and less time trying to give our opinions on experiences we've never lived, the world would be so much better. So I really like to leave that door open. And then whatever I get taught, I just try to pass it on in a way that makes it accessible, so that other people don't have to do that, like you were saying, Marianne. I mean, I can't imagine having to live your life where there's already so much discrimination and already so much misunderstanding. And then on top of that, in every single space you go to, have to be the poster child. That's not fair to you, and it's not fair to anyone who is just trying to live.
I think the most powerful message as well, and I'm not sure if people would agree with this, but to see, dare I say, a cis person who really gets it, that's advocating, makes it really difficult for other cis people to just dismiss this as something that's crazy. That actually, here's somebody that's mirroring my sense of gender, arguing for these people that are different. And I think that in itself is really powerful.
Well, there are a lot of cis people who want to give a lot of opinions on trans issues, and yet a lot of them haven't taken the time to sit down and get to know what the issues really are. I had a thread on Twitter this morning, and it was about the fixation in UK media right now over the detransitioning people, right? I mean, yes, we do know that some people discontinue transition. We do know that some people do that. And that voice, of course, needs to be heard, right? But there's such a fixation on it. And I was arguing that, given that we know that the rate is so low, I mean, it's 1% or less in terms of detransition or regret in virtually every study, if the media is going to cover one person's story on detransition, they should cover 99 stories of people who have transitioned and are living their best lives, right? Because that's balanced representation.
I so agree with you. I mean, I have done all my learning by listening to people, by listening to their story, by trying to understand what it might be like for them to be living with their identity. And actually, it's so much more exciting listening to those people than to seek out the one or two that have for whatever reason not continued on that journey. And I noticed that all of us are deliberately saying because they weren't trans, because I don't think I've ever met anybody who's gone through however long this journey took them and then goes, do you know what, I've just woke up this morning and realised I'm not trans at all. And I've never heard anyone ever say that, ever. I've heard lots of people say, I can't do this right now. I've got to move away from the journey that I thought I was going to go on for this reason, that reason, and another reason. But I've never heard anyone say, do you know what? I made it all up. I made a complete mistake. I'm not trans at all. but I've just never heard it. And if there is anybody out there who has that story that they want to share, then, you know, we would love to talk to you and put a proper representation on what the public want to hear. And yes, you know, I'm not going to mention the program that was on last night that was talking again about detransitioning. And again, that one story, where were the other 99 stories? Because they're so much more exciting. I've loved getting to know all of the trans people that I've met and learning from them. It's been amazing. And actually, I don't know what it's like to be trans. I don't know what it's like to have diabetes. I don't know what it's like to have cancer, because I've never personally had those things. But I'm a doctor, and I've talked to lots of people who have had cancer. I've talked to lots of people who have diabetes. So I kind of get a feeling for what it might be like to live that way. And that's what we as doctors and as humans should do. We have a brain, and we have two very good ears mostly to listen and try and understand what it might be like.
I was just going to say this idea of, I think you said it earlier, Helen, about when an adult or a child goes into the GP's practice to talk to the GP, there's almost a paralysis from the GP to be able to just listen and learn, that they feel that they've got to be the expert, and because their expert status is being challenged, that they want to do nothing. You know, I think the doctor wants to get the people out of the surgery, or not always, but more often than not, get them out of the surgery because actually I'm being challenged here. My view, what I've been taught hasn't prepared me for this.
Well, I'm loving the idea of this email, this warning shot email that if you've got an appointment, if anyone listening's got an appointment with your GP in 2 weeks' time to discuss this very thing, how about popping an email or a little letter into the receptionist and just say, please, could you show this to the doctor 10 days before my appointment, to give that doctor a chance to go through what you went through, Amanda, in the few minutes that you allowed yourself before you went back in to cuddle your daughter, to have that shock, dismay, oh my goodness, and imagining the whole of your life in the next 3 seconds, what it's going to be like and how it might change, and give your doctor that chance to go through a little bit of that, so they're not caught in the headlights, as you say, Marianne, which is what. It's the worst, isn't it? You tell your doctor something really important and their face drops. It's
And it takes away the excuse for them to say, I don't know anything about this. They've had every opportunity to do a bit of research. And actually, more crucially, I'm going off my own experience here, to actually say the words to the doctor was really, really difficult. And I said everything but transgender. I think I might be questioning my gender. I couldn't say anything in the affirmative because I wasn't sure what the reaction. Having a letter or an email go ahead of you would actually pave the way. It wouldn't be such a struggle to actually utter the words.
Yeah, I think we sometimes forget that doctors are human. And, everybody who works with the public is human. Everyone whose face we're going to read is human. So it is good if you don't think that there's necessarily going to be a full on board, wonderful, positive reaction to send that email. What a wonderful idea. It's something that I never would have thought of. I remember talking to our dentist's office over the phone, and what an awkward conversation that was. I think just because I felt so vulnerable at the time, I felt so raw. I was just waiting for somebody to say something awful about my child. All I wanted to do in the whole world was protect her. And I knew that these steps were necessary, but wow, they were hard. The option of sending an email to them would have been really big. And so I can't imagine what it's like for a trans person to be sitting in a doctor's office trying to explain that to a doctor, because I'm one removed and it was hard for me. So that must have been really hard, Marianne.
I keep putting it down to trauma, if I'm honest. I think we've learned to hold it in all our lives, to say nothing through fear, that even when we're given the opportunity, you'd think the sanctity of a doctor's surgery would be one of the safest places to talk, and really it should be. But the truth of the matter is actually physically getting the words out. I've worked with people in therapy working with me 6, 7, 8 sessions, and they've never said the word transgender. They've talked, they've inferred, they've walked around it. I've tried to take them there. So what is it you're trying to say? To actually say that word and admit it and say it out loud can be really, really difficult.
Words are so powerful. I remember even just sitting down with Zoe and for the first time saying the words, I'm a lesbian. And I felt all these different feelings. I mean, on one hand, I felt the wave of shame that came from never saying those words out loud before. I felt intense fear, even though this would have, I didn't think any bearing on our relationship. Our relationship was fine. Clearly, she's a woman. I'm a lesbian. I love her. She loves me. This should not be a problem. But I think also just so much relief too when I finally said the words, and just this weight was off my shoulders, and I felt on top of the world for a couple of days, just being able to go, yeah, I'm gay. Yeah. And it was, and that is about as close as I think I can get to the experience that you're describing. But those words, it's like, once you say them too, you can't take them back. So there's a lot of vulnerability in that, to be able to finally go, and like, just let it out. And then, you're not putting that back in the bottle though. That's it.
I think once you've unblocked that passage as well, everything starts coming out then, everything you've wanted to say. So somebody said to me, you've got to be careful you don't bang on too much, No, I've waited all my life to say this, and whether you want to hear it or not, you're going to get it now. It just kept flowing, I wanted, before we go too much further, I was going to say, a lot of people come to me and they're about to come out to their partner, and one of the biggest fears is, I'm going to lose my relationship. And I actually wonder, my experiences, I've got lots of friends whose marriages have survived transition. And actually, I would say probably 80% survival rate. Yeah, I think the notion is that it's unsurvivable. And I just wondered what your thoughts were about that.
When Zoe came out to me, I did a web search, and I've been told since, by the way, that web search was not complete, because there were stories out there of positive, successful relationships, but I didn't find any. What I found a lot of was, my partner came out as trans and it destroyed our marriage, and this is not survivable. It's just too much trauma for a family, and all sorts of things. And that just made me really mad, because it made me want to try even harder, because I didn't know where our relationship was going to go at the time. So, but I was like, well, you know what? No, I'm not going to just read all this bad news and decide that this is our story. That's not it, because I know that she loves me. I know that she wants to work this out. I know that I love her, and I know that I want to work this out. So it can be messy. And I think that that's something that we don't necessarily talk about. For some people, I know some people whose partners have come out and they've been like, great, honey, I support you. And it's really not a big deal. I would say that for a lot of people, though, again, our identities are so tied into how the world sees us. And so even though what I had before didn't necessarily fit me, it was something I was comfortable with, because it meant that the world saw me a certain way. And when Zoe came out, I think that the biggest stress for me was how the world was going to perceive us afterwards. And that also included things like, if she were to lose her job, even though that's not something that can legally happen, we all know it still happens. And another reason will be given, but really it's because people don't want the trans person at that job anymore. And I thought, if she loses her job and has a hard time finding another job, that's going to possibly impact us. There's so many other factors that can lead to people struggling in a relationship after trans people come out. But ultimately, what I want people to know is that it is very survivable. I mean, if your sexual orientation's aligned, and I think that the trans partner, the cis partner's sexual orientation is also just as valid as the trans person's gender, right? So, I mean, if your partner comes out and you just don't find that connection in an intimate way at that point, that can be problematic. But But I think for a lot of people, you know, we love the person, and the person is the same, except, you know, better, right? Like Zoe's the same. She's the same person, but an upgrade in so many ways, in her joy, in her smile, in everything. She just glows now. And so, yeah, it's not only survivable, but thrivable, because we're thriving, and so are a lot of other people.
Yeah. I think the reason you don't find the stories that you were probably looking for on a Google search is because I think the ones that get on with it aren't writing about it. They're just getting on with it. It's the ones that have got anger, or I don't know, just want to, you know, that are angry at the world, that want to share that pain that they're going through. I've worked with some couples in therapy, and I remember one couple in particular. They used to come in and they used to sit opposite, and I did very little. I just kept them apart. But the wife, going at the trans partner, just all this stuff had to come out, this anger, and they came week after week. But always 10 minutes before the session was about to finish, we'd bring it back down, and they sat for the last 10 minutes and held hands. And I never had a doubt that it was going to survive at all. You knew that, yeah, she'd got to get this stuff out, but genuinely the love was there. And the fact they used to hold hands, it used to just fill me with hope.
When I wrote in my book, I remember writing about the two Amandas, and I would call them logical Amanda and emotional Amanda. And logical Amanda thankfully had the experience of having a child that she loves unconditionally come out as trans. That got all of the learning stuff out of the way. So at this point, I knew who she is isn't up for debate. You know, this is who she is. And so when Zoe came out, this was a very, you know, I didn't have to learn Trans 101. I already knew it. I also knew that this was not a choice. This was not a lifestyle. This is not something she was doing to anyone, that she was really just trying to be herself finally, and that it wasn't being done to me. It was not a betrayal, and that, you know, there was really nothing to be angry about. So that was logical side. But then there was emotional side. And emotional side had been married to this person for 18 years and was shell-shocked in so many ways that this was happening. And I had all these feelings. And so she would come out, unfortunately, to play at times. But I'm glad Zoe really gave me the space to work through that. She let me feel my feelings, and, you know, and she let me have my bad days, and she let me have my good days. And she gave me a lot of room to decide what was best for me. And I think having that compassion, I was trying to be very compassionate with her, and she was also trying to be very compassionate with me. And that helped us so much to get to this incredible place that we are now. I think it was just having the room to really feel all our feelings. It was a gift that I'm really glad that she gave me.
I think a lot of people that I talk to as well, as soon as one partner comes out as trans, is that the other partner tries to put lots of boundaries in. And I think that can be something that causes a lot of frustration, because you might agree to the boundaries, but you already know before you agree that you're going to struggle with them, and then the repression or the frustration. So it can be trying to set boundaries, I think, within a relationship about whether somebody can go out dressed or wear makeup out, or I don't know, whatever the boundaries are, can actually be quite toxic. And I think the ones where you can actually, you know, just go on the journey together, and at any time, you know, exit with good conscience if you need to, that we took it as far as we could. Sorry, this isn't working. And it could be either of you that, for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think, you know, with Zoe, I knew that it was not my place to put any boundaries. Just as I don't place any boundaries on Alexis's journey, it's not mine, right? And that's why I leave it wide open. And I'm like, you are who you are, and I've got your back no matter who you are, right? And I believe you, and I trust you. And so I did the same with Zoe. And I celebrated all of the different things, all the different milestones that were important to her. And initially, like early on, I think I struggled with the idea of letting go of who I thought she was, of the ideas around our marriage, of the ideas around our life. But very, very quickly turned into, you know, I remember the day that she was She got her hormone prescription, and I just burst into tears and hugged her at the door when she came in with it. And I was so happy for her. And I remember this part of me behind me thinking, wow, did you ever think that you were going to get here? But that's the thing about giving things time and listening to people and learning. It ended up being this incredible experience for both of us, seeing her finally live her truth.
Well, I've been really inspired by the stories that you've told us today, and thank you for sharing them with us from such a long way away. I hope that your stories will inspire other people who've listened, and I'm sure that they will. You've certainly had a really exciting gender and sexuality journey, you and your family. And I just want to say thank you so much for sharing that with us. And, we'll put the details of your book underneath, because you say it more and more and explain it in your book, and the way that you explain it is passionate and lovely, and thank you. So thank you for being with us. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you. Once again, I've learned new things, which I always love. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Been lovely meeting you, Amanda.
Thank you. We hope you've enjoyed our programme. Do go ahead and subscribe if you haven't done so already. If you or anyone else are affected by any of the topics discussed in our podcast and you'd like to contact us, please drop us a line at doctor@gendergp.co.uk. We're very happy to accept ideas for future episodes and guests, or if there's something specific you'd like us to cover. You can also visit our website, www.gendergp.co.uk. You can follow us on social media @GenderGP, and you can sign up to our monthly newsletter. Full details can be found in the show notes on our podcast page. Thanks for listening.